House will please be in order. Those persons not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer today by a gentleman from the 59th District, Douglas Shamblin.
Let us pray. Almighty God, as we come before you today, we're thankful for all the blessings that you have given to us, for we know that all good things come from you. We know that each of us are privileged to represent our constituents, and we pray that you will grant us wisdom, guide us and direct us in the decisions that we make, and help us always to show a spirit of civility and respect towards one another. Be with our state, be with all of our leaders, and bless our people. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
All members and guests will remain standing. We'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance today by the gentleman from the 14th District, Douglas Foggin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Tuesday, February 28, 2023.
Lady Number 36, Douglas Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Lady Number 36, to ask unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? There are no objections. There are no objections. Introductions. Introductions. Gentleman from the 43rd, Douglas Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to announce that sponsored by the West Virginia Academy of Family Physicians and celebrating the 34th anniversary of the Doctor Today program. Our family doctor today is Matthew Davis from Lewisburg, West Virginia. Everyone, please give him a warm welcome.
The gentleman from the 88th, Douglas Hillenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our pages are actually being trained behind the chamber right now, so perhaps a little later we can also acknowledge them. I have two pages here today from Frankfort Middle School that I'm pleased to be introducing. Spencer Rhodes and his mom and dad, Mark and Amy, and Alexander Horvey, his mom Pam, and his sister Evie. They may be in the gallery, so if you'd all welcome them.
Chair was unaware of that. If there's no objection, we'll return to introduction of pages later in the program when they're all out here. Okay, if there's no objection, we'll do that. Lady Number 63rd, Douglas Dittman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North Gallery today, we are joined by our President of the West Virginia Fire Association's chief, representing West Virginia State Firemen Association, and he recently had an anniversary of 55 years of service in the West Virginia Fire Service. So thank you so much for your service. Let's thank him and make him feel welcome. Thank you.
Gentleman 28, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honor and the privilege today to introduce some not only very good friends of mine, but we have with us in the South Gallery the 2023 State of West Virginia Air Rifle State Champion, Miss Aubrey Dillon. Aubrey is accompanied today by her brother Trent Dillon and her mother Carrie Lynn Dillon. Will the House please make them feel welcome?
Are there other introductions? Standing committee reports. Select committee reports, executive messages.
House Bill 3272, relating to the operation of private trust companies in West Virginia, was presented to the governor on March 1st, 2023.
That message be received. Are there other executive messages? If not, Senate messages.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed the following bills without amendment. Committee substitute for House Bill 3042, relating to forbidding excessive government limitations on exercise of religion.
Communication be received.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3308, authorizing PSC consider and issue financing orders to certain utilities to permit the recovery of certain costs through securitization via consumer rate relief bonds.
Communication be received.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed the following bills. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 422, requiring public schools to publish curriculum online at beginning of each new school year.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Education.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 440, authorizing DOH pay current obligations from State Road Fund.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 476, exempting managed care contracts from purchasing requirements.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 541, providing for election reforms.
Communication be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 547, increasing penalties for drug possession and updating list of offenses.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 572, reforming cause of action for public nuisance.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 573, relating to child support guidelines and support enforcement commission.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 650, allowing physician assistants to own practice.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 660, establishing aggravated felony offense of reckless driving resulting in death.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 666, placing cap on maximum penalty that may be imposed for first-degree robbery.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 681, clarifying that juvenile competency determination process extends to status offenders.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Senate Bill 732, prohibiting insurer from imposing co-payment for certain services.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Senate Bill 734, requiring adoption of cloud computing services by state agencies.
Communication be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Committee substitute for Senate the Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has adopted the following resolutions. Committee substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 10, U.S. Army Air Corps Private Albert J. Sutphen Memorial Highway.
Communication be received. Resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Committee substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 13, Wyatt Brothers World War II Veterans Memorial Road.
Communication be received. Resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Committee substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 16, U.S. Army First Sergeant James Arnold Browning Memorial Bridge.
Communication be received. Bill will be the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Committee substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 17, U.S. Navy Petty Officer II Philip Joseph P.J. Hayner Memorial Bridge.
Communication be received. Resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules. Are there other Senate messages? If not, resolutions.
House Concurrent Resolution 62.
Gentleman the 8th.
Morning, everybody. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committee as indicated on the chamber automation system.
Gentleman the 8th, ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the chamber automation system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Petitions. Bills introduced.
House Bill 3563.
Gentleman the 8th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committee as indicated on the chamber automation system.
Gentleman the 8th, ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the chamber automation system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Motions? Unfinished yes, gentleman from 100, right now.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I request that my comments on HCR 2, Corporal Mann, and HCR 25, PFC Brumbaugh, be printed in an appendix to the journal.
Are there objections?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
No objections are heard. That'll be so ordered. Other motions? Unfinished business? Bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2862, relating generally to requirements for shareholder voting by the West Virginia Investment Management Board and the Board of Treasury Investments.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 55th, Douglas Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The bill defines terms and sets forth applicability of new requirements. It establishes a standard of care. It prohibits the board from relying on proxy advisor services unless the service provider agrees to make recommendations according to that standard of care. It prohibits the boards from entrusting direct holdings to any manager unless the manager agrees to cast proxy votes according to the standard of care. It requires a contractual agreement between the boards and their fiduciaries that the board be provided advance notice and opportunity to advise fiduciaries with respect to certain shareholder votes, and prohibits the board's fiduciaries from casting the shareholder votes for the purpose of furthering non-pecuniary interests, and it requires the board to exercise any proxy voting choice options for indirect holding according to that standard of care, and establishing reporting requirements related to shareholder voting as well. That's a summarization of the bill, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to take any questions. I urge passage of the bill.
Question before the House: shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Lady from the 4th, Douglas Storch, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chair of Judish yield for a few questions?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm not on judiciary, but I do understand the Investment Management Board testified to the committee. Would you say that their testimony included that they believe that this could limit access to some of the best money managers if this bill were to pass?
They expressed some concerns with how they were going to work with the directives set forth in the bill. I don't know that they definitively said it would sort of prohibit them from working with the best, but I think they were trying to figure out how they were going to make the bill workable.
Would it have been your takeaway from their testimony that they believed that this bill could cause separation of the decision to hold a stock from the proxy voting decision that could jeopardize that return on that stock?
Repeat that question.
Was it your takeaway from the testimony that they gave that the decision could be jeopardized to hold the stock in the proxy voting decision, where that could jeopardize return on that stock?
Well, I think what the bill does, it adds a sort of a definition to what may and may not be considered when sort of evaluating how the proxy voter is going to cast that vote, and that's defined as sort of a non-pecuniary interest. So to the extent that evaluation by the Investment Management Board in determining whether a proxy voting agency is taking into consideration a non-pecuniary interest causes delay and therefore a loss on a sale, I suppose it's possible.
And in my discussions with the Investment Management Board, it was my takeaway that they had indicated that they not necessarily anticipated, but were concerned that it could cost as much as $20 million additionally. Would you have gotten that in their testimony as a concern?
$20 million from the portfolio, a reduction in $20 million in the overall portfolio, or $20 million in sort of costs associated?
In costs associated with conforming with the legislation, the change in the legislation this bill would, because of them not being able to waive requirements without exposing themselves to liability.
It's possible that there could be some costs. It's possible that there may not be some costs. I think it's speculative any way you sort of slice it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, may I speak to the bill?
Lady is recognized.
Thank you. I think we all agree that we do not want to subscribe to anyone's personal agenda, and nobody wants to mess with the pensions of our seniors. I believe there are good intentions behind this bill, but I have concerns with what it will do in practical application. I did speak with the Investment Management Board staff, and they do not support this ideological proxy voting either. But it's my concern that this bill may have some unintended consequences. I don't believe any of us want to mess with the pensions of our seniors. I think there are significant issues with the bill that have not been fully vetted by its proponents, potentially setting us up on a path with far-reaching implications. So I will be a no vote on this bill, and I urge you to as well. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 79th, Second Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I could confirm that those sentiments were presented by the director of the Investment Management Board when he spoke before the Judiciary Committee a couple of weeks ago. He didn't want their hands to be tied, and we heard testimony about some of the history of why this board was set up, and it was set up to insulate investment decisions from politics so that the money could be managed by professional money managers to try to maximize the returns and to be, again, insulated from the politics of the day. And the politics of the day right now is what this bill is actually about. It's very explicit in the bill that this is about ESG investment, environmental, social, and governance considerations. And ESG is one of those terms that has been thrown around over the last couple of years. It's been kind of turned into a boogeyman. People are against it without always knowing exactly it means or what types of companies it applies to. So I wanted to talk a little bit about those types of companies that might fall into that category and the companies that our state investment management board might not be able to invest in should this bill pass. So again, ESG, it's environmental, social, and government. So let me talk first about environmental. The question of future jobs in this country, future manufacturing jobs, is one that we've debated in this body several times, usually when there's a company that is considering siting here and a company that might have some sort of deal that we need to approve as a legislature. But let's think about some of those companies that we've invested in and that we're welcoming to the state of West Virginia. Nucor is one we've talked about a lot. Nucor is a steel manufacturer, as you know. It's a green steel manufacturer. They're going to be producing the lowest carbon steel in the country. We talked yesterday about electric school buses, about Green Power, the company here in the Charleston area. Again, these are green manufacturing jobs. We came into special session and passed that microgrid bill that allows Precision Cast Parts and Berkshire Hathaway to come to the state of West Virginia. Precision Cast Parts is producing zero carbon parts for our aerospace industry. These are the jobs of the future. This is not some agenda to attack our coal industry. These are our future jobs. If we want to have a manufacturing base in West Virginia, we want to welcome companies that are going to thrive in the future. And I'm glad that we've taken those steps to do so. This bill sends a message, the wrong message to those companies. But ESG is not just environment, it's also social. And what's meant by that are diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that are so common among our companies across the country, to make sure that everybody has a shot to get a job, to make sure that the workforce is reflective of the diversity of our communities and the diversity of our country. Corporations want to make sure that they welcome the best and the brightest, where nobody's excluded. And again, who are we trying to give a message to? If you look at the Fortune 100 companies across the country, every single Fortune 100 company has a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. Every one of them. And it's not just the high-tech companies on the coast, it's agricultural companies, it's manufacturing companies, it's insurance companies, and yes, it's energy companies too. It's just the way business is done. It's the way it should be done, in my opinion, but it is the way it's done. Environmental, social, and government considerations are with us. In my opinion, they're a good thing. You may not agree that it's a good thing. I think it's good for us to have diversity. I think it's good for us not to discriminate. Even if you think it's good to discriminate, I would urge you to vote against this bill. Again, as the director of the Investment Management Board testified, they don't want their hands tied. They've been doing a good job as they've been insulated from politics, getting good returns for the state of West Virginia. Please keep it that way. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 2nd, Douglas Teslo.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think these are principles seem high sounding. But let me say this about this bill. The politics that everybody seems to avoid with investment, they don't want politics and investment. Well, it seems to me that the politics are upon us whether we want it or not. What about not investing in fossil fuels? That was the pledge of some of the biggest investment companies in this country. And what did we do about it? The treasurer of this state said we will not invest in those companies or with those companies. That message had to be sent. We didn't like it. We want no politics in investment. I think that's a great thing. I don't have any problem with inclusion, diversity, and all that, those types of things. But I don't want anybody to say that we just cannot invest in fossil fuels. I will save some of my remarks for later because it's coming out now, and I've always said to the people who generate electricity in this state, reality will set in, and they're going to have to see a way forward for using all types of energy. Well, it's upon us. It is starting to set in. I'm glad to report, and it's going to be a good thing. If we stop investing in fossil fuels right now, the country will be worse off for it. If we lose money in investments because we don't choose to use people who are against investing in fossil fuels, then I think the country will be worse for the wear. This sends a message. I think it's an important message, and I think we need to send that for everybody in this state. So I intend to vote for this bill. I understand the principles on the other side, but I think for the betterment of the economy of the state of West Virginia and for stability in electric grids in the United States as well, I will tend to vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
From the 25th, Douglas Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Chair of Judiciary yield for a question?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And what we're trying to do with this bill, is this something that the Investment Board could do within their investment policy guideline?
The Investment Board could do this. Essentially, what this provides, and I was listening to the gentleman from the 79th's remarks, this does not preclude a shareholder vote in favor of a corporate policy that furthers an ESG initiative, if it can be determined that that ESG initiative is in the pecuniary interest of the beneficiary.
Thank you. Permission to speak to the bill?
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, tread lightly. Be very, very cautious of what we're about to do, unfortunately, in the sake of politics. First and foremost, this is going to put red tape out there for the investment board. It's going to handcuff them. And I would argue it's going to endanger their status as a fiduciary. not being able to do everything. In layman terms, and I will concur 100% with the gentlelady from the 4th, are the unintended consequences. We are dealing with folks' livelihoods, their retirement. I know several of us in this body have had the luxury and have worked hard for their money and have done quite well with investments. And most folks know it's not a good posture to put all your eggs in one basket. It would be crazy to put it all in ESG, fossil fuels, consumer discretionary, consumer staples, whatever it might be, but we need all of those tools to be able to have a good ride into retirement. Our pensions and what we have is one of the best things that we do in West Virginia. And sure, we've had some tough times, but a lot of folks, especially our state workers, this is what they're counting on. And they don't need to be hamstrung on their livelihood when they get into their mid-60s, their 70s, living on fixed incomes and worried about, are those investment managers making the right decisions? I think we should remove the red tape, all right? Don't have add so much bureaucracy and add government to this process. As the gentleman said, they have the tools to be able to create their own investment policy guideline if they see fit that these aren't good investments. And I think we should just give them that autonomy and reduce the red tape. Please vote this down. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 88th, Doug Hillenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many years ago, my wife and I were talking with our financial advisor, and my wife had a question for him. His answer was, "Oh, you don't need to know that." That wasn't a good answer. The following morning, I called the office and wanted to talk to his boss. He is the boss. Really? He must have a boss somewhere. So I ended up talking with a regional vice president, and I let him know that I'd be closing that account and I moved my assets elsewhere. I sat in the Judiciary Committee and listened to the testimony, and I was disconcerted by the fact that the board leadership that was there talking to us did not feel that they should hear the people that their money that they're managing. They thought they should be able to act totally independent without advice. Years ago, I thought that not listening to my wife was a bad idea. I think not listening to the people is a bad idea. This is a good bill. I'm voting in favor of it.
Gentleman from the 53rd, Doug Pritt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak to the bill. You know, what is ESG? ESG is something where we are going to be potentially voting, and these interests will be voting against the pecuniary interests of the people of West Virginia. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about ensuring that when investments are done, when people are making these proxy votes, they're looking at solely what is in the pecuniary interests of the people of West Virginia. To me, it's really that simple. And I'll ask you one basic question. Should we be factoring in anything other than the pecuniary interests of the people of West Virginia when these investments are made? So to me, it's pretty open and shut in terms of what we should be doing here. There was a recent article that came out, and it was talking about the Treasurer's Office, and the Treasurer's Office had recently, appropriately, blacklisted any kind of firms that were participating in any kind of ESG. Well, you know what the result of that was? Is that the Treasurer's Office is actually doing better than the firms that we were previously investing with. So this is not about politics, this legislation that we're pushing forward right now. What this legislation is about is taking the politics out of it. There shouldn't be any kind of politics involved, and that's exactly what this bill is trying to do, to take the politics out of it. If you want us to be factoring in anything other than the pecuniary interests of the people of West Virginia, then vote against the bill. If you want us to be taking the politics out of it, then you should be supporting this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I urge support.
Gentleman 12th, Dr. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1984, we elected a gentleman to be the treasurer of the state of West Virginia. During the year of 1987, April, May, and June, over some churning of accounts of bonds, the Treasurer's Office lost $279 million in that short period of time. We impeached that gentleman, and in the process set up the West Virginia Investment Management Board to take care of the things that we need to take care of for long-term investments for our pension programs. They've done a pretty damn good job of putting us back up on top. When I got here in 1987 and was on the Finance Committee, the chairman of the Finance Committee happened to be from Parkersburg at that time too, and he was told by the Supreme Court that he had to put $400 million in the checking account of the teachers' retirement program so they could write checks immediately as the first obligation of this body. Now that's how bad things were, okay? And now we're wanting to restrict this management board in some kind of policy that has nothing to do with investments. I think this is wrong, and I urge you to vote this down. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 61st, Dr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Addressing the gentleman from the 79th, using discrimination as a word, I think, to kind of scare you guys away from this. I don't know about you, but I welcome and I want discrimination in my personal investments, and I think the people of West Virginia, their pensions deserve some discrimination in their investments. Our hardworking West Virginians deserve return on investment. I don't know if we're all aware of this, but the S&P 500 outperformed these ESG funds. So knowingly choosing funds that do not perform well is not in the best interest of hardworking West Virginians. There was some mention about the cost involved with this. All we're simply doing are asking investment advisors to put guardrails up, to say we don't want you choosing funds that are harmful to hardworking West Virginians. That's all we're doing. Stay inside the guardrails. That may have a minimal cost. I think once again we're talking about a scare tactic to kind of move us away from this. This is a simple bill, ladies and gentlemen. This is simply to protect hardworking West Virginians' pensions, doing things that we always have and not bringing politics into this. I urge passage of the bill.
Gentleman from the 22nd, Dr. Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First and foremost, I rise in strong support of the bill, but I think that the debate has unfortunately went to where we're going to place our money. I think that we've dealt with that actually last year. This bill deals with how we would vote or how our financial managers would vote with the shares that we own. We would vote with those shares in the best, what's called pecuniary interest, and that's defined in the bill. And that says that all we care about is a return on our investments as we hold shares governing companies. So when they have a shareholder meeting, we're able to say, look, as a shareholder, as we're going to vote upon what this company is going to do, we want to make sure that all we're voting for with our shares is to provide the greatest return on investment for our pensioners and our retirees and our investments. Now, there's been some discussion related to the cost of compliance, and I'd like to point you to page 4 of the bill, line 75. Waiver after reasonable efforts is all that it says. And so if the investment management folks cannot comply, if the board is unable to comply with the provisions of subsection D of this section without significantly increasing costs or limiting the quality of investment options or services available to the board may waive the requirements of said subsection with regard to a particular fiduciary upon the various findings that are laid out in the bill. So when we purchase shares of any fund, of any company, we are able to vote on how that company is going to operate and how that fund is going to operate. And all this bill says is that our investment managers aren't going to apply factors other than that which makes us the most money and benefits our pensions to the greatest possible degree. That is, I think, the layman's definition of what a fiduciary responsibility actually is. Mr. Speaker, it's a very simple bill. I urge passage.
Gentleman the 15th, Secretary Keaton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. I want to refer not necessarily to all these big concepts and what policies we're imposing on what board and these sorts of things, but to talk a little bit about what these ESG scores look like in reality, because they end up getting assigned to actual companies, right? So my favorite example of this from the last year has been to take the True Value Labs, which is essentially it's an AI-based company that gathers everything that a company's ever said and sort of assigns an ESG score to it, right? True Value assigned a score to ExxonMobil, right, which is kind of it's a blue chip stock. It's a very typical kind of investment, big company. Clearly every governance safeguard in the world to make sure that the CEO just doesn't abscond with the cash or anything like that. And then they gave a rating to FTX, which, just for those who might not be aware, was this big cryptocurrency exchange that completely melted down last year. That this guy, his name is Sam Bankman-Fried, he stands up and he goes to all these conferences and he says all of the right or the proper left-wing shibboleths, right? He talks about sustainable investing. He talks about all of these nice, fluffy words that get everybody all excited. And then all of the ESG firms pick up all of this information, analyze it, and say, wow, this company's values really align with what we like to score for. And all of that to say that FTX, which ended up in receivership, and the CEO stole all of the cash and is now like facing all these charges from the SEC. At the time that they got their score from the ESG firms, they had 3 members of their board of directors, okay? One was Sam Bankman-Fried, right? The actual CEO who stole the cash. 2 was just another executive at the company, and then 3 outside counsel, right? So you have a company that's managing billions of dollars of financial transactions, cryptocurrency exchange, that's the only governance protections are 3 members at the very top of this corporate structure. And they're getting higher leadership and governance scores from one of the leading ESG labs than ExxonMobil. You don't get any better managed than one of these big giant companies. So that's all to say that if we're concerned about what a pecuniary interest standard does to our state's pension funds, I think this is a wheat from chaff sort of thing, right? That we have all of this information out there that's being produced, conceivably misinformation that's being produced as to what makes a good investment, that is ideologically driven, and if we want to anchor our state's financial decisions to what is in the best interest of the shareholders, the citizens of this state, then I think that's what we should do, and I think we should pass the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 100th, Dr. Ridenhour.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I was in judiciary at the time that this was presented. Treasurer Riley Moore testified in the Judiciary Committee relative to this, And he basically directly refuted what the other members of the IMB had testified to earlier, that this would not, in fact, significantly hurt our investments. And in fact, he's just sent me something that the House of Representatives in Congress just passed a bill that will stop ESG investment in our retirement systems. I would encourage us to do the same, essentially, with this vote to ensure that our investments are focused on the people of West Virginia, the values of West Virginia, and in principally focusing on what's going to do best for our investments so that we do actually get the return on the investments that we're trying to make. So, frankly, if we are going to do this, I mean, our Democrat colleagues have basically told us that this is the type of bill they would like to continue to see because ESG is an important part of investing from their perspective. If you want us to invest in ESG, then vote against this bill. If you want us to try and vote what's best for the people of West Virginia, what's going to get us the best return for our money, then I would encourage you to vote for this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 10th, Doug Anderson's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to shed a little bit of history on this debate we are having. When I came to this legislature many years ago, something that was of concern to me because it was my profession, the teachers' retirement system was 9% actuarially funded. Today, it is between 70 and 80% actuarially funded. I stand to be corrected by the lady from Ohio, but I believe I'm fairly close. I can't give you the exact percentage. We went to the people of this state, and they passed a constitutional amendment allowing the state to invest in equities. Had we, the people of this state, not entrusted us as a legislature and the agencies we created to invest in equities, the teachers' retirement system would not be between 70 and 80% funded today. It would be considerably less, and the burden upon us as a legislature would be to find the money to pay the pensions not only of teachers, but of all public employees, the judges' retirement system, and the various other retirement systems that this state manages. The people entrusted us to make this judgment. We created the Investment Management Board, and we tasked them, in order to meet the pension obligations of this state, we said, you need to bring us back a 7.5% rate of return for us to meet the actuarial responsibilities to maintain and sustain the pension systems of this state. This debate has resulted in ESG. I, quite frankly, want the Investment Management Board to have the flexibility they need to return the greatest amount of return to this state. Part of it is personal. I don't want to have to raise taxes someday to meet these pension obligations, which we, by various court rulings, must meet. I want the Investment Management Board to have the flexibility to manage and deliver the greatest return for the benefit of the pensioners of this state, for the benefit of the state of West Virginia. I don't have time to micromanage from the floor of this House of Delegates their decisions. But I think the results they have delivered to this state speak for themselves. The budget implications for the future of this state, if we constrict them, I don't think are positive. So I rise today to tell you that I intend to vote against this piece of legislation. Thank you very much. I would like you to consider my remarks.
Gentleman to 76, like a Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You know, I know enough to know when I don't know a whole lot about a certain situation. When I don't, I try to listen to my colleagues that I know have some history or that they have some expertise in a certain field. And so I've listened to some of this debate. The gentleman from the 100 talked about Democrats. I've heard a number of Republicans who've talked about how this is not a good idea. I've heard from my friend from the 25th, who's a financial advisor, if you didn't know, at Edward Jones. I've talked privately with my friend from the 80th, who's also a financial advisor with Northwestern Mutual. I've listened to the finance chair, who's in charge of the finances and our budget in the state of West Virginia. I've listened to people who have been here for a number of years, who have seen the history of why the Investment Management Board is run the way it is. And I hear all this stuff, too, from members who I don't know about their expertise, but talk about ESG funds. Well, we're talking about proxy voting. We're talking about these management firms that are potentially going to be less likely to make the investments that make the most money for the pensioners in the state of West Virginia. I know who I'm listening to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate on the bill? Gentleman, the first item McGee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to give a couple comments real quick. You know, I think this ESG phenomenon sort of entails this acronym DEI, diversity, equity, inclusiveness, in some sort of form, but I think that's anything but, this is anything but diverse. In a way, it sort of deforms our portfolio and our culture along with it into some sort of centralized uniformity that's imposed. So I think it's very ironic that we're calling things diverse with this ESG and then a sort of subset that carries off into a tangent of this whole DEI acronym that's a phenomenon in our culture now. So I think the bill's a great bill to move forward, but I want to caution just one thing. I heard a lot of people saying we must ultimately determine, you know, our investments on a pure rate of return, I believe. And we need to figure out that that might not also be the direct way to go about things. We should also weigh sort of the values of some of the stocks and portfolios and companies that we're investing in. For instance, I mean, I don't think we should invest maybe in Lockheed. You know, you'll make millions, probably get a great return, but it might be on the blood of children, you know. It might be on the blood of the warfare state. So there's many different factors that should go into it, and maybe we should have a balanced approach to when we're taking into consideration some sort of traditional values that some of these companies represent before we stick our money in them. Anyway, that's my comments.
Gentleman from the 54th, I get Pushkin's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 79th yield? I'm going to step back to make this a little less awkward, I think. Earlier, we heard reference in comparison to like a less reliable, like cryptocurrency type company. Someone compared it to ExxonMobil as an example of a company that we should be doing business with. So, does ExxonMobil have an ESG policy?
ExxonMobil has a very strong ESG policy.
You're familiar with it?
I'm looking at it on my computer right now. It's got components related to the environment. It's got components related to DEIJ. It's got all sorts of stuff.
Okay. So they have an ESG policy, ExxonMobil.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to the environment, even ExxonMobil is preparing for a net zero future. This is ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil is talking about significant progress in diverse representation among their employees. They've got a DEIJ policy. This is ExxonMobil. This is why, when I gave my remarks, I said that every Fortune 100 company has gone down this path.
Thank you for yielding. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination anyone would consider ExxonMobil a quote-unquote woke corporation. As was just stated, every major company has these policies. We shouldn't be tying the hands of the board and tying the hands of the state based on, fake, boogeymen we're hearing about on certain news networks at night. This is ridiculous.
Gentleman from the 86th Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I'll try to make this the shortest speech of the day. As my friend from the 76 mentioned, not knowing a lot, looking to the people that do this for a living, I know absolutely nothing about investments. However, I did sit through a long testimony in judiciary, at which time my friend from the 53rd had questioned the IMB advocate, and he asked, "What are you doing now?" And the guy from the IMB said, "Well, we're doing this now." So the question, obviously, that everybody asked, and we see this on a number of other bills, why do you oppose the bill then? I don't know much about investing, but long career in law enforcement, I know BS when I see it. I'll be voting yes for the bill. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 29th, Dylan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Chair of Judiciary yield for a question or two?
Yes.
Thank you. Would it be fair to say that the definition of a fiduciary is a person who is tasked with managing a set of assets for the best benefit of financial return?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. In your understanding of ESG, is it the purpose of ESG to maximize shareholder profits, or is it to advance other non-financial objectives?
The purpose of this bill is to avoid the latter, certainly. I think it could be argued that in certain instances there are, as I said, initiatives that are associated with that sort of movement that could yield some pecuniary value. I'm not sure what they are. I'm sure that might be possible too.
In the opinion of the Chair, should a fiduciary have the flexibility to make investments which are not in alignment with the fiduciary standard, to the extent that those investments are targeted toward things which are non-financially oriented, politically oriented, socially oriented, or anything else that would not be in alignment with advancing the interest of that portfolio financially?
If the gentleman's asking for my personal opinion, my opinion is that a fiduciary should indeed be solely focused, actually, on the return to the beneficiary.
And finally, is there any provision in this bill which would prevent the West Virginia Investment Board from doing exactly that, focusing on their fiduciary requirement?
No.
Thank you.
Gentleman, the 42nd, Doug Steele is recognized.
I had determined not to say anything about this this morning, but I think there's a couple things that have been said that I think are, there needs to be some facts drawn out that I don't think a lot of people in here know or understand. The first is this bill talks about the selection of board of directors at various different companies that the state of West Virginia is investing in. And it does not talk about what we actually invest in. But I would hope that we begin the discussion of what we actually invest in. Because if you look at what we're investing in, I'll give you an example.
I just told the speaker about this. There's a lawsuit going on over neonatal abstinence syndrome. Children that were born to mothers that were told by their physician that they could take prescription opioids during pregnancy and there wouldn't be a problem, found out later that there was a huge problem with doing that. And these children are going to have problems for the rest of their lives. These drugs were put out, most of us know, by Purdue, Johnson & Johnson, several other pharmaceutical manufacturers. Back in 2015 or thereabouts, a company called SK Cattle, a hedge fund down in New York, purchased Johnson & Johnson's interest, Purdue Pharma's interest, as well as acquired the rights to the Tasmanian alkaloids for opium, as well as other sources of opium throughout the world. And they became the world's largest manufacturer. And by publicly available documents from your investment management board, West Virginia is a significant investor in SK Capital. So our investment management board, the gentleman, the chair of energy, talked about our teachers' retirements, our judges' retirements, our public employees' retirements, and how we care about the return. We care about the return that we're getting. What return are we getting when we're funding the destruction of our own people? Literally. We literally funded the destruction of our own people. And these are in publicly available documents. We've got to stop turning a blind eye in here to what's going on that investment management board. This is real. We have an entire generation, 2 generations, 3 generations of people that have been enslaved to opiates, and we used our public funds to invest in carrying that out, all because it made a good profit. I'm sure it did make a good profit. I'm sure our pensions did grow, but at what cost? At what cost? $4.5 billion a year is what the opioid problem costs this state, between state and federal funds. $4.5 billion a year. What was the return on that investment? I would tell you it's negative. And that's where I think through this bill, is a first step in regaining control of figuring out what we're spending our public monies on. That $25 billion plus that the Investment Management Board manages is sizable. It can have a lot of influence. And knowing that it influenced the opioid crisis in this state over the last little bit disgusts me. And I hope that we will continue doing something about supporting this bill and other bills like it so that we can get a handle on what the money in this state, the people's money in this state, is being used to do. Because what I've seen it do is poison generations through the spread of opioids. And I would encourage passage of this bill. And I hope we can continue moving down this path.
For what purpose does the gentleman of 61st Circuit Jeffrey seek recognition?
Would the gentleman from the 79th yield for questions?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Earlier, we heard you question on the topic of Exxon. Was it the process of a proxy vote by proxy advisors that actually led to Exxon flipping to a management board that allowed an ESG process back in, say, May of 21?
I don't know.
Okay. Would you know if that would have happened, would it have been the results of that decision that would have led to approximately 20% reduction in oil production? Would that have caused that from the ESG?
I told you that I don't know about that decision.
If that was the case, what kind of effect would that have had on West Virginia shareholders?
You're asking me to comment on a hypothetical?
Yeah.
So if what was the case?
So if that was the case, that due to ESG policies from these proxy advisors that went in and flipped the actual board at Exxon to implement ESG policy that in turn reduced oil production what kind of effect would that have had on West Virginia investors in Exxon?
How's their profits doing?
Well, production was down, so
And how's their profit?
that I don't know.
I think that's what the investors care about. I think ExxonMobil's doing quite well.
But what about the investors in that? Did it as well as it had been?
I think ExxonMobil is a very, very profitable company.
They are. Thank you, sir.
For what purpose does the gentleman 22nd, Doug Linville, seek recognition?
Would the gentleman from the 61st yield?
Does the gentleman from the 61st yield for a question?
Yes, sir.
Was any of that hypothetical?
No, that came from a BlackRock investment report, actually.
And was BlackRock our fiduciary at the time?
I believe they were.
What effect would a 20% reduction in oil production have on gas prices?
I think it'd be significant.
So,
I mean, an economist, I'm not, but
would you agree that a 20% reduction in one of the largest oil producers in the world would likely have resulted in a significant increase in gas prices to the detriment of the people of the state of West Virginia, all using their money to do it?
I'm going to guess that it would.
Thank you.
Is there further debate on the bill? If not, does the gentleman from the 55th Capito wish to close debate on the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 73 ayes, 23 nays, 4 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2862 relating generally to requirements for shareholder voting by the West Virginia Investment Management Board and the Board of Treasury Investments.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, the clerk will please communicate the acts of the House and the Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, it is nearly 11 o'clock. At this time, we will return to introductions. So are there introductions? Gentleman to 55th, Doug Capito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a couple pages that I'd like to introduce that have joined us. They may be on duty right now, but today we have with us Lola Nicias, who is the stepdaughter of our Council to Education, Melissa, and Melissa's also chaperoning Maddie Rothwell. They're both at George Washington High School. Go Patriots. Would the House please make them welcome?
Lady Miss 63rd, Doug Dittman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have more guests in the gallery today, so if you direct your attention to the North Gallery, my husband and daughter are joining us today, and with them is a very special friend of ours. He is a local legend, Korean veteran, and just celebrated his 90th birthday, John Gothrop. Please make them feel welcome.
Gentleman 12th, Dr. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, in the rear gallery, the entire 8th grade class of Weir County Middle School, would you please stand? They are chaperoned today by the assistant principals, Sandy Harris, Lou Ann McVeigh, Nathan Edwards, Jessica Thays, Amy Bevel, Hagan Root, Ben Moore, and my daughter, Brandy Chris Keaton. They are here today to learn about what we do here, and after they leave here today, they are going to the Supreme Court. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you being here.
Gentleman from the 54th, Doug Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, in the South Gallery, we are joined by some great patriots from George Washington High School. If they would stand as I say their name: Ben Below, Reese Lovern, Liza Westerman,
who I went to George Washington High School with her father, I believe, and Audrey Street. Would the House please make these great patriots feel welcome?
Gentleman 23rd, Dr. Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to have a page here today. She's actually doing her duties right now, Josie Adams. And she's joined today by her father, who's in the North Gallery, Jeremy Adams. If he would stand, if the House would please make them feel welcome.
Gentleman from the 25th, Dr. Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, we are joined today by the best patriots in the state, the ones from Spring Hill Elementary. I have several of them paging with us today. I will announce your names. I want you to stand up, and I'll announce the parents as well. First with us, we have Sarah Baisden, all right, with Miss Carrie and Jeremy Baisden, are her parents. We have Mia Atkins with her today is my good friend, Mr. Matt Atkins. We have Mr. James Woolfolk with my friend Tasha Halls' mother. We have Layla Clarkson, another friend, Nera Dulce Berner, her mom. Kaden Goodman, Miss Lori Hart is her mother. We have Keandra Nix, and with her grandmother, Margaret Brewer. Ion Kingston with his brother, Muhammad Kingston. And Vinny Kumba with his teacher, also Mr. Matt Atkins. House, please make them feel welcome.
Lady from 81st, Dr. Walker.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I have a good friend here from Local 596, David Friend, that's in the South Gallery. David, would you please stand up, and will the House please make him welcome?
Gentleman from the 30th, Dr. Adkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce in the North Gallery, Jim Odaker from the Lincoln County Volunteer Fire Department, if he's still up there. Please stand up. Thank you, bud.
From the 18th, Dr. Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Joining us in the South Gallery, and if these folks would stand as I call their names, we have some patriots and friends from the West Virginia Citizens Defense League and also a recent chair of the Kanawha County Republican Executive Committee, Cheryl Patrick, and one of her boyfriends, Larry, and Teresa Howell. If those folks would stand, the House welcome them.
From the 88th, Dr. Hildenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Traveling all the way from Mineral County today, we have a couple pages, and if they'd please stand when I introduce them. From Frankfort Middle School, we have Spencer Rhodes. Where'd he go? Uh-oh. Oh, there he is behind me, and Alexander Horvey. And they're escorted today by Spencer's dad and mom, Mark and Amy, in the North Gallery, and Alexander's mom, Pam, and his sister, Evie. If we'd all welcome them.
Lady from the 56th, Dr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everybody. Happy crossover day. I see a friend in the South Gallery that I wanted to introduce. Mr. Rusty Williams is the founder of the new Church of Cannabis. Now that RFRA has passed, if everyone could make him feel welcome.
Lady from the 19th, Dr. Kraus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you can pay attention up in the South Gallery, I see one of my friends up there, Todd Williams. He is here with other members of the West Virginia Citizens Defense League for the signing of Senate Bill 10, which is the campus carry bill. If the House can make him welcome, I would appreciate it.
Do we have other introductions? If not, clerk will please report the next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2878 to grant the Fleet Management Division oversight authority of the state vehicle fleet.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? Okay, if not, shall I recognize the gentleman to 68th, Dr. Phillips, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2878 is to require the use of telematics and grant the Fleet Management Division oversight authority of the state vehicle fleet. I urge passage.
Question before the House is shall the bill pass. Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 90 ayes, 1 nay, and 9 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2878 to grant the Fleet Management Division oversight authority of the state vehicle fleet.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2939 relating to filing of lien by municipalities for collection of refuge fees.
This bill was advanced to third reading yesterday with the right to amend. Our clerk will please report the First Amendment.
Delegates Foster and Linville move to amend the bill on page 3.
22nd, Delegate Linville to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do we need to withdraw the First Amendment? Yes. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw HFA Foster and Linville 2-28, number 1.
Are there objections to the First Amendment being withdrawn? There are no objections. Clerk will please report the Second Amendment.
Delegates Foster and Linville move to amend the bill on page 3, section 13, line 56, by adding a new subsection and inserting the following.
Gentleman 22nd, Delegate Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment just provides some clarity. It's a notwithstanding proviso, which generally relates to the ability of a municipality to file a lien against an employer or a person who is self-employed for failure to pay any part of a user fee, and then adds a further proviso which states that the subsection does not apply specifically to the bill with regards to refuse, fire, police, or street fees, or the right to file a lien for any of those things when those services were provided within an area designated by the municipality to be covered by said services. That's a summary of the amendment, and I do urge its adoption.
The question is on the amendment just explained. Gentleman from the 26th, Delegate Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise to speak against the amendment. This bill actually started out as a fairly simple bill. Added one word. In the part of the code where municipalities can file liens. She said, now why do they need to file a lien? Okay. If you don't pay your county property taxes, there's already a clearly delineated course of action that the county takes to get your property in essence. Now, on that part of municipalities, though, they don't have that ability. So all they can do is file a lien. The lien won't come into effect until the property is disposed of. And then the cities, municipalities will get their money back. Now, the purpose of the bill was, there was an oversight when this bill was created, and it forgot to add refuge fees. So these are direct fees that are paid by citizens for services rendered. Just like if you lived in the county, you would pay a refuge fee to have your garbage picked up. So that is all this bill was intended to do. Now, the amendment before us, on the other hand, really changes the intent of this bill, and it allows now to open up all the questions about user fees. That is not the intent of this bill. The intent of this bill is simply to correct an oversight where so it talks about fire service fees and things of that nature. Somehow refuge fees got left out of this bill. That's the only thing that this bill seeks to do. The amendment tends to go way broader and start getting into the ability for cities not to collect user fees. And I just don't think that it was all the intent of this piece of legislation, and I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman from the 51st, Delegate Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am speaking on behalf of myself here, but I would urge passage or adoption of this amendment It takes 7 lines on a sheet of paper. It's not massive. It is filed within the rules of the House. It is regarding an open code section that we are dealing with. I believe that it adds honesty and accuracy to the law. I would urge adoption of the amendment.
Gentleman from the 20th, Douglas Foster.
Thank you. Does the gentleman from Cabell yield?
Yes.
You stated that the amendment allowed for non-collection of user fees.
Well, it's a correction if there's a non-remittance.
Non-remittance, well, I'm confused by that because it looks like all this does is clarify that liens can't be filed for these user fees.
Which would be a non-remittance.
But
I mean, the only reason you'd file a lien was if there was a non-remittance.
But even under this amendment, they'll still be collected. It's just if they're
Well, then there'd be no reason for
filed against the employer, correct?
To the gentleman, there'd be no reason for a lien if it was properly paid.
Well, and that's my question. But they still have to be paid under the law. That's still required for these liens, these municipal fees to be, user fees to be paid.
There's no lien if they're properly paid. You're correct.
All right. Thank you. And speak to the amendment.
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
And what this amendment does is just clarify when these liens can be filed because the user fees aren't in there. So essentially, when these liens are filed, the bill does mention like refuse fees, fire, street fees, and this is just clarifying that user fee that's taken out of the paycheck is not part of this lien procedure. And I would urge passage of the amendment.
Question is still on the amendment explained by the sponsor, the gentleman 22nd, Douglas Linville. Is there other debate on this amendment? Okay, if not, gentleman from the 22nd to close debate on this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I appreciate the gentleman from Cabell's intent with the bill, this is not simply about garbage. This bill now, or if we were to adopt this amendment, is about taxation without representation. It's about user fees charged to people when they're not even in that municipality. And if you're a self-employed person, you're a gig worker or something like that, during COVID, and you, for instance, stayed home entirely and chose not to come into that principal place of business within the jurisdiction of a municipality, you were still charged those fees for services which were never rendered. Of note, the federal government actually, via a court case, and all federal employees, for instance, are carved out of having to pay this user fee. So it's not even an equally applied tax. Folks, this is about fundamental fairness in the tax code. Folks are unable to vote in these municipal elections, and yet fees are applied to them. We've worked to make this germane to the bill, but let me be 100% clear. This is about taxation without representation, and I would urge adoption. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Is the demand for a roll call vote sustained? Roll call vote demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 61 ayes, 33 nays, and 6 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there other amendments to the bill? If not, the clerk will read the bill a third time as amended.
House Bill 2939 relating to filing of lien by municipalities for collection of refuse fees.
Gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill amends the West Virginia Code to allow a municipality to enact an ordinance permitting a municipality to file a lien against real property located within the municipal corporate limits for unpaid delinquent refuse fees. In addition, as just amended, it would preclude a lien to be filed in situations where the employee, where the fee was originally generated, was not present in the boundary of the municipality in the performance of their jobs for that particular time period. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker, and I urge adoption, passage.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 79th, Tuckett Hanson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 20th yield to question?
Sure.
Originally, this was a one-word bill, just with the word refuse, but now most of the bill is your amendment, so I wanted to try to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, originally this was just a garbage bill.
Just a what?
Yes, originally this was just a garbage bill.
Correct. Yeah, it still is. Anyway. I'm reading your amendment, and your amendment has a proviso in it that says, provided that this subsection does not apply to refuse, fire, police, or street fees. So that proviso, when it refers to this subsection, that is the subsection J that you're adding to the bill. Is that right?
That's correct. So
Okay.
those would still be applicable under a lien.
Okay, so
It does not change the original intent of the garbage bill.
So if subsection J does not apply to refuse, fire, police, or street fees, what does it apply to? What's left?
The user fee, as mentioned.
But like, for example, in Morgantown, the user fee is for streets and police, which I think is common across the country. So if you're exempting out street and police, what's left for the user fee?
Well, that's the exact point, is it's that user fee, which is charged on workers that are not within the municipality. So that's the whole point of the lien not being on, the city not being able to file a lien on somebody that's not actually working there.
But I'm trying to understand what the fee is charged on. So for example, let's just use the Morgantown example because I know that better than the other cities. Morgantown has a $3 a week user fee. It's used to fund our police officers, and it's used to pave our streets. Would your amendment have anything to do with the city of Morgantown, or does this proviso that says the subsection does not apply to police and street fees, would that exempt Morgantown from your amendment?
All it would do in the amendment is those user fees for people that are not within the municipality can't file a lien on.
And how would it do that? Because it says provided that this subsection does not apply to refuse, fire, police, or street fees.
Because the user fee is something different than those refuse, fire, police, and street fees, which is listed above in the former subsection that the original bill amended with the refuse.
Isn't that exactly what the user fee is? The user fee is the police fee. The user fee is the street fee.
No, the user fee is the one taken out of an individual's paycheck.
To pay for police and streets.
It's not specifically mentioned what it is to pay for. It's taken out of the paycheck.
Are you aware that when an ordinance is passed by a municipality to enact a user fee, the ordinance is very specific about how that money is to be used? If you look at the Morgantown ordinance that was passed according to this section of state code, it very specifically says what portion of that $3 is going to police and what portion of it is going to streets. It can't go to anywhere else. It's in the ordinance.
I haven't read the ordinance in Morgantown. I can't give you specific answers on to what it does or doesn't apply to.
Okay. Thank you for yielding. Now that this bill that started as a garbage bill has this long paragraph, I'm trying to make heads or tails of this paragraph. This is the amendment that caused the delay yesterday when we were talking about the germaneness of an amendment. And ultimately what happened is the sponsors of this amendment went back after that discussion and are trying to figure out a way to shoehorn something into this bill that doesn't really belong in this bill, and that's why this amendment doesn't make any sense, because they're trying to shoehorn something in to get over the objection of whether the original amendment was germane. They were able to get something that is germane, apparently, but they didn't come up with something that actually makes sense. At best, when a city tries to interpret this, they'll just ignore it because the proviso sort of exempts out what they're trying to do. But at worst, it'll actually cause confusion and cause cities like Morgantown and Charleston that use these user fees to fund the police to not be able to collect their user fees. So I would urge a no vote on this bill.
Gentleman from the 55th, Doug Capito.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 22nd yield?
Yes.
You cited in your example earlier in evaluating this, I realize the amendment has been adopted, something about taxation without representation. Would you agree with me that it's possible that an individual may live within the municipality in which their employer is located but perform no work in that municipality?
I would, but so that's interestingly enough in this proviso, in the final proviso, it's sort of the last three lines, if you have the amendment up. It's if service relating to these fees was provided within an area designated by the municipality to be covered by said services. And so that is the instance in which those fees could be charged and these collection attempts could be made, including by filing a lien. So in response to your and the other gentleman's questions, I think that it makes provision for the providing of those services.
Okay, and before I vote, just so I want to get your, as I assume you worked on the drafting here, for any person who is not physically present, I mean, I assume this is the case, but I want to make sure that is never physically present in the municipality for the month, for the pay period, for the year, forever?
So the way that I would look at that is during the term for which the municipality chooses to collect the fee. As in the case of user fees, those are generally weekly.
Okay, so you say weekly. Is that what you're saying on the floor? Weekly?
My interpretation of the amendment as adopted.
Is it a week-by-week assessment?
Again, my interpretation of the amendment as adopted would be over the term for which the services were provided and the fee was charged.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman from the 27th, Doug Griffith is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are no, nor will there ever be, large cities in the state of West Virginia. I sometimes think Montani semper liberi means I'm going to do what I want to do and you leave me alone. The reason is the Walmart concept. So many of our citizens, and I experienced this as a mayor, good people choose to live outside the boundaries of a municipality but enjoy all of the amenities. Walmart does that to avoid paying B&O tax. Many businesses do that. So cities struggle to fund police and other services. People drive on those roads, they enjoy the restaurants, they come in and pay in a sense for it, but they don't pay the user fee. They can stay outside the city limits and enjoy the city, but not contribute more directly to that. There won't be any large cities. There won't be any major league sports teams, any large cultural centers. And I love West Virginia for our simplicity in that regard. But there is a struggle for municipalities to pave their streets, pick up their garbage, provide all the services needed by their citizens without overtaxing those citizens. And we're against that. And yet they struggle for a way to fund some important services that are enjoyed by everybody inside and outside of those corporate limits. That's all this debate is really about. And I think if the amendment passes, there's going to be an awful lot of people just revolt and say, I'm not paying that fee. They can't do a thing to me. And they're going to further cripple the cities, and we're going to see more decay, more crime, more difficulty. We've got to come up with alternatives if we're going to do this to the cities. We've got to help them make themselves cleaner, more attractive, and not be like Walmart and sit outside the city, kill all the businesses inside, take those services and those customers away from them, but don't make your contribution. I get the taxation without representation, but it's not taxation without a benefit, a job, a way to raise your family, a way to be in a city and enjoy its amenities. So I hope you consider it in that standpoint. And I urge that we think about what we're doing to the cities of West Virginia and why they don't grow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there other debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 64 ayes, 34 nays, and 2 members absent. The majority of members voting in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2939 relating to filing of lien by municipalities for collection of refuse fees.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next
For
bill on
Senate
third
Bill
reading.
199, requiring purchases of certain commodities and services from state use program partners. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for the committee substitute for Senate Bill 199 maintains the purchasing division's ability to solicit bids on the open market for contracts under its purview. This has only been available since last session when this body changed the requirement that it purchase commodities and services from nonprofit workshops without competitive bidding if they were comparable in quality and fair market value. This bill is a compromise between those two extremes. Again, it maintains the division's ability to seek competitive bids in the open market, but it does grant a preference to the nonprofit workshops, which are now referred to as state use program partners. The preference is that if the state use program partner's bid is within 5% of the actual lowest bid, then the purchasing division will offer the contract to the state use program partner if it can match the lowest bid. Because state use program partners are essentially treated like any other market participant in the bid process, there's no need for the existing governor's committee for the purchase of commodities and services from the handicapped. The committee substitute for the committee substitute therefore removes all sections of code referencing that committee. Finally, the bill updates terms such as replacing the term handicapped with disabled throughout. Mr. President, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 220, Industrial Hemp Development Act.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that further consideration of the bill be deferred until the conclusion of today's first reading calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 468, continuing Cabway-Lingo State Forest Trail System. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 468 continues the Cabway-Lingo State Forest Trail System and expands the types of vehicles which may be permitted on roads and trails in Cabway-Lingo State Forest to include the use of utility terrain vehicles, UTVs. The bill permits the Director of the Department of Natural Resources to authorize the development and use of certain connector trails from existing private systems, specifically the Hatfield and McCoy Trail System, solely to provide further access to state park and state forest recreational facilities. Happy to answer questions, but otherwise I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 29 yeas, 4 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 470, making adoption records accessible for medical purposes. Third reading of the bill. The bill is advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. The Committee on the Judiciary moved to amend the bill on page 1 by striking out everything after the enacting clause.
Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to explain the committee amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 470, the amendment, the strike and insert amendment, Senate Bill 470 addresses adoptions. And the fundamental purpose of the bill is to create a pathway for children who've been adopted to get to the medical records of their biological parents. And the project turned out to be somewhat complicated. The strike and insert amendment amends 2 sections in Chapter 49 of the Code and 2 in Chapter 48. Both chapters involve family child welfare. Under the amendments in Chapter 48, we're dealing essentially with private adoptions. And what the bill does generally is it requires the DHHR to develop forms that would be given in any adoption case through the circuit clerk to the petitioners that they could give to the biological parents to allow the biological parents to indicate whether or not they agree to be contacted, whether or not they agree to allow their medical records to be accessed, and under what circumstances, how they would like to be contacted if they consent to that, either through an intermediary or directly. But the idea is to at least create an opportunity for an adopted child or his or her guardians in appropriate cases to make a request for those medical records. The other part of the bill addresses cases where there's an involuntary termination of parental rights. And what we're saying here is that when a court terminates parents' rights, the court's going to put language in the order that says that the child or the adopted child or the adoptive parents will have access to the child, to the medical records of the biological parents. Yeah, and there has to be an assertion or a showing that there's a medical need to access those medical records. Mr. President, I'd be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill, or excuse me, adoption of the committee amendment.
Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Committee on the Judiciary. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be re-engrossed. The question now is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Mr. President, thank you. I've given a comprehensive explanation of the amendment, or the bill, which is now the strike insert amendment. Again, I would be happy to try to answer questions. I urge the bill's passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk has the title amendment.
The Committee on the Judiciary moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 540, creating misdemeanor offense of willfully urinating or defecating in public. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. As to Senate Bill 540, the short title really does cover what the bill addresses. It creates criminal offenses for that conduct. I'd be happy to try to answer questions, I think. Otherwise, I urge the bill's passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close machine, ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 546, adding and removing certain compounds from controlled substance list.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that further consideration of the bill be deferred until the conclusion of today's first reading calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 552 relating to abortion. Third reading of the bill. The bill is advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Question is on passage of the bill. Do I need to engross this one? I don't. Okay. Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the purpose of Senate Bill 552 is to provide informed consent when an abortion, subject to the approved exceptions in 16-2R3 of West Virginia Code, is performed. The bill revises definitions consistent with the definitions in 16-2R2. The abortion bill, which was the abortion bill passed during the special session. There are two main changes to the definition. There's a definition for designee, that is a medical professional acting on orders of the physician, and the mifepristone risk evaluation strategy, which is a risk mitigation strategy. The bill makes the provisions of the article applicable to physicians that are certified under the mifepristone risk evaluation and strategy program. It replaces language that referenced physician and replace it with licensed medical professional. This is a term that is defined to mean physician. The term designee is used throughout the bill to mean the person licensed under Chapter 30 practicing within his or her scope of practice. The protection for a licensed medical professional prescribing a non-FDA approved drug therapy is removed. Language is added to the bill that in the case that a child is diagnosed with a disability in the womb, it is important that the mother is presented with information. In the case of a female seeking an abortion of a non-viable embryo or fetus, the bill provides information that is made available. The bill also provides a 24-hour telephone number that shall be established by DHHR to maximize public awareness of its existence, which may be called to obtain a list and description of agencies in the locality of the caller of the services that are offered. The bill provides that the Bureau of Public Health will publish up-to-date information on its webpage regarding in utero disability that has been peer-reviewed by medical experts, and additionally specifies more variables for inclusion on the webpage and specifies that a search format shall be user-friendly and printable. The bill provides a licensed medical professional who knowingly performs, induces, or attempts to perform or induce an abortion in violation of this article is subject to disciplinary action by his or her applicable licensing board. If the licensing board finds that the licensed medical professional has knowingly and willingly performed, induced, or attempted to perform or induce an abortion, the licensing board shall revoke the medical professional's license. The severability clause for the informed consent bill is repealed, and the previous severability clause is reinserted. Mr. President, I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Marion, will the senator from Marshall yield? Senator yields.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. I just got a few questions, if you don't mind. Could you tell me what perinatal hospice service means? I've never heard that term before.
Well, I haven't either. Because it doesn't really apply. Hospice is to provide supportive care, only supportive care, in the end stages of life. Okay, and where we're using this in the bill, it doesn't really fit because we're talking about a of delivering a baby that's incompatible, a fetus that's incompatible with life outside the womb. So if there's no life outside the womb, there's no need for hospice, because at delivery, the fetus would be non-viable or not alive.
So the perinatal service would come in where?
Well, maybe there's a few minutes, maybe there's a small period of time where the baby, like 5 minutes or so, or for the mother, for the parents, something along those lines for comfort measures. It's strictly for comfort measures for helping people deal with the tragedy.
Okay, thank you. I never heard that term before. And you talked about the 24-hour hotline, Senator, that's going to be established by DHHR, correct?
Yes.
Did we have a cost for that? I've seen no note was requested for that.
That was an old bill, wasn't it? There's no fiscal note, so, but yes, I assume there'd be a cost with setting that up.
But we didn't look at that before. Who will maintain it? Because I know it's not, I think DHR was stricken, if I recall, from maintaining the hotline. Who will maintain the hotline?
What they split? Medical Services? EMS? It would, DHHR, but, as you know, as we all know, there's a bill that's reorganizing DHHR now, but more specifically the Bureau of Public Health.
So they'll maintain it, or they'll assign some,
I think that would be up to them.
Okay. Are you concerned that this could set a legal precedent for us not prescribing other FDA-approved medicines? We're saying that this can't be prescribed in West Virginia, correct?
No, that's not accurate.
Okay.
It can be. No one's doing it currently. You need a special license to prescribe. You're talking about the mifepristone?
Yes.
Yeah, you need a special license to prescribe it.
And no one's doing that now?
No one's doing that in West Virginia.
And what about the pending court cases? Will this have any effect on those, or have you had that discussion?
Briefly came up, but I'm not very expert on the legal stuff. Let me ask my lawyer here. We don't really have a comment on the pending court cases.
Okay. I just know they're out there. I didn't know if that come up in committee discussion or
not. I do believe, although I do believe this was constructed in a way to try to not affect any impending or any pending litigation.
And I don't know if you can help me with this, because I don't understand this legalese here, but there's 2 severability clauses in this. Can you explain to me what those do? I don't recall seeing 2 severability clauses in a bill, but I may have over the years, but I don't recall that.
Okay, so one of the severability clauses is for the 16(2)R portion of the code, which is the abortion law, and the other one is for this bill, which addresses the informed consent.
Okay, I just have a couple more, and I appreciate this, I really do. Are you concerned that this in the future could cause us to, or give us reason to pick and choose what FDA drugs we could regulate in the state of West Virginia? It just seems this is more of a federal kind of guideline, and we're intervening here.
I don't, as I said a little bit, I don't think we're regulating any drugs.
You don't think we're trying to preempt federal law here?
No, I don't think we're regulating a drug.
Okay. And I know you're a physician, very well respected, and I respect you immensely. You know that. Have you had any conversations with OBGYNs in regard to this legislation? And I'd like to know, if you did, what their thoughts were on this.
Yes, they're briefly, mostly during the special session, more so than this bill. No, their thoughts are they're going to abide by the law, whatever that law is, and they just tried to guide us to, make sure that our bill was at least as close as possible to allowing them to perform the standard of care.
did they give you, and this will be my last question, I promise, but did they give you an opinion on whether they think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
No, I didn't ask them. I didn't ask them for their input on the bill.
Okay.
I did ask them if they were the ones that told me about no one in the state is prescribing the mifepristone.
Okay, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Eddie.
Further discussion, Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will not belabor this. I believe that the health chair basically explained the bill, but I want to make certain that members are clear on something. This law, the Women's Right to Know Act, and all of the criteria set here in terms of making sure a woman has information when she's making a decision as to whether or not to abort, making certain she has access to perinatal hospice services, which is counseling and essentially support and help. There are times in which even a child who they say cannot live outside the womb does live, maybe for 1 hour, maybe for a day, but it does happen. So making certain that they're connected to those services and that they have support. All of these things in this bill was existing law in West Virginia. It is not new. We are reinserting it because when we passed our law in September, this inadvertently got left out. And yes, we do prohibit in the state of West Virginia abortions except for cases of rape and incest, and if the fetus is, basically not viable. If it's an ectopic pregnancy, that's not considered an abortion. But the point being, even in those cases of rape and incest, a woman should have all the information and support and services. Even in the cases where the fetus is not viable, a woman should be wrapped around with support, information. This is what this bill does. This isn't anything new. And in terms of there being no fiscal note, DHHR has already been doing this. This has been our law in West Virginia. This right to know has been law. This hotline, this website, the information on the website has all been already enacted before, and we're just reenacting it. So I just want to make certain that all members know and feel good about voting for this, because all it is helping women, supporting women in this very difficult decision, and giving them the information so they can make the best decision. I urge its passage.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea, those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 31 yeas, 2 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 581, amending provisions of 2023 Farm Bill. Third reading of the bill. The bill is advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Weld moved to amend the bill on page 15 after line 21 by adding thereto designated Article 39.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment that you all have before you to Senate Bill 581 is the work of myself and our Commissioner of Agriculture. And I'll walk through it. But largely, the intent of this amendment is to restrict the ownership of agricultural land here in this state by citizens of a foreign nation, as well as foreign businesses and governments. This amendment is largely taken from current law that's about 35 years old from the state of Iowa that accomplishes this very thing. And I'll walk you through the amendment briefly. The first subsection, which is 1939-2, this is all new language, delineates that this only deals with agricultural land and that this doesn't restrict real estate purchases otherwise. The second section, 3, states there that a non-resident alien, foreign business, or foreign government may not purchase or own can't own agricultural land in this state, but if they own it currently, on July 1st, 2023, they may continue to do so. They just cannot purchase additional agricultural land in excess of the acreage that's delineated on the next page, which is 160 acres. The restrictions that are set forth in that subsection have a couple of exceptions, and that's agricultural land acquired by divisor descent, or if it's an encumbrance which is taken for security, or if it's acquired through a collection of a debt, such as a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And if should a foreign entity or a citizen of a foreign country acquire agricultural land under those provisions, they have to dispose of it within 3 years once the title is transferred. Moving on, there is a section that lays out the development of agricultural land acquired for non-farming uses. So if a foreign entity purchases what is currently agricultural land to, let's say, for purposes of creating a housing subdivision, they may continue to do so, but have to do so within 3 years. Moving on, there is a registration process, and so on or after July 1st of 2023, within 60 days after July 1st, 2023, a non-citizen or foreign business or foreign government would have to register the agricultural land that they own with our Commissioner of Agriculture. The next session also discusses reports, and so that if a foreign entity or individual acquires agricultural land for an immediate use that is other than farming, they have to file a report with our Commissioner of Agriculture as well. Lastly, and this is pretty much the meat of this amendment, is the enforcement and escheat provisions. And so if the Commissioner of Agriculture finds that a non-resident alien or foreign business or foreign government acquires farmland or holds title in violation of the bill, they may file a report with our state's Attorney General, who then can review the report as well as any additional facts to that particular situation, and may initiate an action in the circuit court of any county in which the property is located. If the court finds that the land in question has been acquired in violation of the provisions of this amendment, they will issue an order or enter an order escheating the property to the state, which then has to also be recorded with the county clerk where the county is located. When that property is escheated to the state, it goes to the State Commissioner of Delinquent and Non-Entered Lands, which is in our state auditor's office. Then as soon as possible, the state auditor's office will sell that property in a manner in which we sell delinquent tax properties. We had a bill on that earlier this session. The proceeds then of that sale, well, first I should say that the court order will also set forth a minimum bid that will be obtained for the sale of that property. And then the proceeds from that sale go first to pay the court costs, including the appraisal of the property should one be done, the costs associated with the auditor's sale, and then any outstanding penalties, which the penalties is the last section of the bill. And then if there is any remaining amount, they will then go to the person or entity that has been divested of the property. If there's anything left on top of that, Mr. President, the remaining funds will be deposited into the general revenue account of the county where the property was located, or if it's in multiple counties, in a prorated amount based on where the property is. Last section, as I mentioned, is the penalties, and those come in the amount of $2,000 for those who violate the provisions of this amendment, and any penalty collected pursuant to this section, working with the Commissioner of Agriculture, they wanted those fines to go to they'll be returned to the Commissioner and used for the benefit of the Cedar Lakes Camp and Conference Center. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. President. Urge adoption of the amendment.
Some further discussion? Senior Senator from the 5th.
From Brook Yield.
Will the Senator yield? Senator yields.
Senator, let me ask you a question. So if a piece of property that, and let me take Wayne County as an example, that we have that is partly been a coal loading facility and the other portion of it would be considered farmland, then we could not sell that land to a company that's wanting to come in on green hydrogen or something like that because they're a company from not in the United States?
Nope. So they would be using it for it's a non-agricultural purpose, and that goes back to page 3 of the amendment, development of agricultural land acquired for non-farming purposes. And so if a foreign entity, citizen of a foreign country, purchases agricultural land but they intend to use it for non-agriculture, non-farming purposes, they have 3 years to convert it to do so, but there's no restrictions once they do.
So the situation that I'm talking about, how much of the land do they have to do in agriculture?
So they would have to meet the definition, and I didn't say this, and that's my fault. So the first section of the amendment delineates or has definitions of what exactly agricultural land is and what farming is. And so it depends on if the land meets the definition of agricultural land and farming use. But and I guess it also depends, not knowing the specific facts of the situation that you're talking, are we talking about one massive parcel, or are there several different parcels
no,
that are
this
included?
is one parcel that, remember, in cases of land that's being used, they were once farmland. They have been used, and let's take a coal loading facility. Then if you sell that, a certain portion of that has to be turned back to farmland, but not all of it. I think that, I guess what I'm seeing in this is a solution in search of a problem as we're looking at this. I don't know, I don't want people to buy farmland and not use it as farmland, but there's some cases where they're going to use it for industrial sites, and this would prevent a foreign company, if that was a farm area, that are going to be bringing technology to us that we've never had from in the United States.
Well, I'm a little, maybe we need to back up because I'm a little confused, because it sounds like they're not going to be using it for agricultural purposes.
They're only going to use, they may only use it as a portion of it.
Okay.
And that portion wouldn't meet the definition, as I see in here, that the Department of Agriculture or the Commission of Agriculture is trying to say we need to do.
And so also, I think we should look at, you know, the limitations on the acreage size in this, in my amendment, is 160 acres. And so the Department of Agriculture, you know, established that number by looking at, you know, they were looking at the average acreage size and typically what consists of a West Virginia farm, because, you know, here we're talking about much smaller farm sizes than if you were in Montana or North Dakota. And so that's the number that they arrived at. So I would want to take that into account as well in the situation that you're discussing. But also, if there, again, was a requirement, then perhaps that could be out-parceled from the larger parcel itself.
Well, thank you. Yes, Mr. President, could I speak? Mr. President, I'm in favor of a farm bill, and this is no intent to try to do this, but I really think we better think very hard about what we're doing here, because this could affect economic development. And we have some real opportunities for economic development, and they may be farmland. And we are, I mean, yesterday we had a group from Taiwan here. If a group from Taiwan, a foreign company, comes in and wants to do something like this, we could prevent them from the economic development. So, Mr. President, I would like for us to put this at the foot of bills on first reading. I'm requesting unanimous consent to put the further action of the amendment in Senate Bill 581 at the foot of bills of the first reading.
Senior Senator from the 5th moves to be moved to the foot of the bills on first reading. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the motion adopted. So ordered. Further bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 593, mandating cost of living salary adjustment policy for state employees. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 593 mandates state agencies, the state police, and county boards of education develop plans for an area market rate salary adjustment policy and then report them to the legislature, the governor's office, and the state budget office by no later than September 1, 2023. The introduced version required implementation of these plans by July 1, 2025, but the committee substitute removes this language, requiring only that plans be developed and reported. The bill specifies certain minimum provisions and criteria those policies must contain, and specifies that employees have no right to file a grievance or to sue over the policy pursuant to the mandate in the bill. Mr. President, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 633, requiring prompt appearances for persons detained on capiases. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 633 would amend 3 different sections in our state code. They're all in Chapter 62 and different articles, but 3 different sections addressing warrants, capiases, bail. The purpose of the bill is to authorize some flexibility in the issuance of warrants or a capias for failure to appear and to expedite appearances for bail review in those cases. The bill will allow that when a defendant who has no documented history of failing to appear does so, or in the court record there's no reflection of effective notice, the court is asked to wait 2 days before issuing a capias or an arrest warrant. If the defendant voluntarily appears within that 2-day period, then he or she is not subject to prosecution for failure to appear. The bill also allows that, or states that a newspaper ad alone is not sufficient notice of a defendant's obligation to appear, or notice of the fact that the defendant's been indicted. There are exceptions to the 2-day period, and they're allowed for danger to a person or the community, or new criminal conduct, or other bail violations. The bill also directs that hearings on bail should be scheduled within 3 business days, and it makes the sheriff of each county responsible for removing inactive capiases from the national databases upon the receipt by the sheriff of notice that a capias or a warrant can be quashed or terminated. The idea behind this bill, Mr. President, is to get people to appearances faster before a magistrate or a judge, depending on which court it is that's issued the warrant. And what the legislature is trying to address, what the bill is trying to address with this, is eliminating those circumstances where people are incarcerated for long periods of time, longer than they should be, before they're brought before a judicial officer to arraign them or to set bail or consider a motion regarding bail. Mr. President, I'd be happy to try to answer questions. I urge passage of the bill.
Is there discussion? Question for Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in affirmative. Excuse me, I lost my place. More than a majority of those present having voted in affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House. I did.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 634, increasing value at which municipal property must be sold through public auction. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under current code, municipalities must conduct a public auction to sell real property that is more than or equal to $1,000 in value. Senate Bill 634 raises that amount to $10,000. Senate Bill 634 also excuses municipalities from notice and auction requirements if they determine that the highest and best purpose for the land is to sell the land to an adjacent lot owner. However, the bill restricts municipal employees, municipal officers, and their family members from benefiting from the disposition of the land or from purchasing municipal land that is adjacent to their own property. I'm happy to answer questions, but otherwise urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Senator from Moab. No. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close machine ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 647 relating to substantiation of abuse and neglect allegations. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 647 amends a single section of the state code. It's in Chapter 49, which is the juvenile code, and it's in Article 4, which is court actions regarding juveniles, and the section amended is Section 601B. I described it at some length yesterday because the committee adopted a strike and insert amendment, and that is now the bill. But this bill addresses substantiation of claims or allegations of neglect or abuse of a child. And this is the one senators will remember from our discussion yesterday that comes from the folks at Jobs and Hope. And the substantiation rules now are interfering with people being able to be employed, people who should be able to be employed. And so what the bill will do is it says when there's an allegation of abuse or neglect that could result in a petition and the department decides not to file one, after a year, it will be deemed unsubstantiated. When there's a petition that's filed, a finding, a substantiation by a caseworker and a petition's filed, but when the case is adjudicated, the judge determines that there's not a basis for it, and the person is not adjudicated guilty of having neglected or abused the child, then that case is going to be deemed thereafter to be unsubstantiated. And then the bill provides a process for someone where there's been a substantiated allegation of abuse that has been adjudicated. Then 5 years later, they can file a petition for those records to be sealed. And the bill gives the court the authority to consider under such a case all relevant factors related to the petition, including but not limited to efforts at rehabilitation and family unification. It says that when a record is sealed and there's an inquiry made to the department about a person's background, then the department will answer that there is no recorded substantiation. Mr. President, be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge the passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine, ascertain the results on this question. 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk has the title amendment.
Senator Trump moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 738, Equipment Right to Repair Act, third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Upshur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 738 creates the Right to Repair Act to give independent repair providers and owners of farm equipment, lawn and garden equipment, and forestry equipment access to information, documentation, parts, tools required for diagnosing, maintaining, or repairing equipment, including attachments and parts for the equipment. The Act would apply to equipment attachments or parts sold, leased, or in use in this state on and after July 1, 2023. Specifically, the bill provides that an original manufacturer of equipment sold or leased, offered for sale or lease, or used in this state must make available to any independent repair provider or owner of equipment on fair and reasonable terms any documentation, parts, and tools required for diagnosing, maintaining, or repairing the equipment, attachments, and parts. This would include providing any special documentation, tools, and parts needed to access and reset the electronic security lock or other security-related functions when disabled during diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. The documentation, tools, and parts would have to be provided to an independent repair provider or owner on the same conditions and in the same time frame as the manufacturer makes to an authorized repair dealer, repair provider. A manufacturer would not be required to divulge any trade secret or provide access to any non-diagnostic or repair documentation. The Act also provides the abrogation, interference, or alteration of any terms of any agreement between a manufacturer and an authorized repair provider, and a manufacturer or authorized repair provider would not be liable for any damage or injury caused to any equipment by an independent repair provider or owner. The bill also prohibits owners and independent repair providers from modifying or disabling horsepower or emission control systems and any safety feature installed on the equipment. Finally, the bill provides definitions, improves civil penalties of not less than, imposes civil penalties of not less than $1,000 for each day of violation of the Act, authorizes the Commissioner of Agriculture to seek injunctions to enjoin violations, directs the Commissioner to provide legislative rules to implement the Act, including establishing a mechanism for administration, resolution of violations by consent order or agreement. Mr. President, I urge passage of this bill, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results on this question. 23 yeas, 10 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action to the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 739 relating to moratorium on carbon capture agreements.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that further consideration of the bill be deferred until the conclusion of today's first reading calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered.
Engrossed Senate Bill 740 relating to compensation and expense reimbursement for members of the legislature.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th. Senator, be these for one moment. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that the further consideration of the bill be deferred to the conclusion of today's first reading calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered.
Engrossed House Bill 2310, provide the Division of Motor Vehicles authority to develop an antique fleet program so that multiple antique motor vehicles may utilize a single registration plate. Third reading of the bill. The bill is advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. The Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure moved to amend the bill by striking out everything after the enacting clause.
Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Wetzel.
This committee amendment is a strike-insert amendment covering changes to our motor vehicle code. The amendment modifies 17A.10.3A on the registration of antique motor vehicles. It authorizes the DMV to develop an antique fleet plate program to enable an owner of 5 or more antique vehicles to use a single registration plate on multiple antique motor vehicles. The amendment works the provisions of Senate Bill 254 into this House bill to prevent code conflicts. Senate Bill 254 passed the Senate earlier this session. That bill changed the annual safety inspection requirement for vehicles and motorcycles from an annual inspection to an inspection every 2 years, effective January 1, 2024. Lastly, the amendment adds a new section designated 17A.3.2A, which is a companion piece to the Title Clearinghouse Bill, House Bill 2506, which passed earlier this year. The new section provides that non-resident vehicles are not required to be registered in West Virginia, but allows them to be registered in this state and be issued a West Virginia registration plate upon payment of all applicable fees to the DMV. Non-resident vehicle means a vehicle titled in this state under the provisions of the Title Clearinghouse Act, which is not intended to spend a majority of time in West Virginia roads, is owned by a business whose principal place of business is not in this state, that is not a common carrier, and that they maintain a local, national, or international fleet of vehicles. Mr. President, I urge adoption of the amendment.
Clerk has an amendment to the amendment.
Senator Weld moved to amend the amendment on page 7, section 3A, line 3.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's try this again. So my amendment to the bill would do two things. The first is that it removes, currently West Virginia has in place a restriction on the vehicles that can get an antique or historic license plate based upon their weight. The amendment that you have before you comes out of a bill that came to me as a result of my discussion with a gentleman in my district who owns an antique Peterbilt truck, but he couldn't get an antique plate or historic plate for it because of the weight of the vehicle, despite the fact that he just uses it for parades and car shows, things like that. And so he wanted to be able to get one of these plates. And so that's the first part of the amendment by placing regardless of weight in there. The second part of it is currently when you have one of these types of plates, you are limited in the time that you can operate it, even though you're not using it for general transportation. And so the second part of my amendment would strike language discussing over that you cannot use or drive a vehicle that has one of these plates over any time that's not delineated, and what's set forth are weekends, beginning at Friday at noon and ending Monday at noon, and holidays. Yes, so you wouldn't be able to use one of these cars for general transportation, but you would, if this amendment is adopted, be able to drive them outside of just on the weekends from beginning at noon on Friday and ending at noon on Monday. Happy to answer any questions. Urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment to the amendment offered by the Senator from Brooke. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Is there further discussion on the amendment as amended? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure as amended. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Question now is on passage of the bill. Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. The bill is as explained with the adoption of the amendment, but with the addition of Senator Weld's bill. The amendment offered by Senator from Brooke, the bill also clarifies that antique motor vehicles are not restricted by weight. It retains restrictions on the use of motor vehicles, but it would now allow antique motor vehicles to be used for recreational purposes on days other than weekends and holidays. I will try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge adoption of the passage of the bill.
Oh, excuse me. Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 32 yeas, 1 nay, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk has a title amendment.
Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure moved to amend the title.
Senator from Wetzel.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw the committee title amendment.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. The clerk have another title amendment.
Yes, sir. Senator Weld moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed House Bill 3218 relating to requiring suicide prevention resources be printed on student identification cards. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill requires all public schools serving grades 6 through 12 and public or private institutions of higher learning that issue identification cards to print on either side of the identification cards the information for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline and the Crisis Text Line. Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions. I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2587 to reflect that county sheriffs will be required to include a breakdown of the distribution of where citizens' taxes will be paid. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed House Bill 2607 clarify that vehicles with a capacity larger than 10 passengers may be used to transport students, provided that no more than 10 passengers may be transported at one time. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed House Bill 2611 to remove certain territorial limitations on a banking institution's ability to offer messenger services or mobile banking facilities. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2638 authorizing certain agencies of the Department of Administration to promulgate legislative rules. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2640 authorizing certain agencies of the Department of Environmental Protection to promulgate legislative rules. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Committee on the Judiciary moved to amend the bill on page 2, section 1, line 8, by striking out the word amendments and inserting in lieu thereof the word amendment. On page 2, section 1, line 10, by striking out the semicolon and inserting in lieu thereof a period. And on page 2, section 1, after line 10, by striking out the remainder of the subsection.
Is there discussion? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. That amendment, the committee amendment, is purely technical. I urge its adoption.
Is there further discussion? Question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Committee on the Judiciary. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2648, authorizing certain agencies and boards of the DHHR to promulgate a legislative rule. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. The Committee on the Judiciary moved to amend the bill by striking out everything after the enacting clause.
Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. This committee strike and insert amendment to the House bill is an amendment to the entire rules bill. So I could go through every rule here now, but I will say instead that the strike and insert amendment, even though it's the whole rules bundle, incorporates technical changes, and I will allow everybody to anticipate a fuller description of the bill tomorrow. I urge adoption of the amendment.
Clerk has an amendment to the amendment.
Senator Trump moved to amend the amendment on page 3, section 1.
Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to explain the amendment to the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Morgan.
So the amendment to the amendment, Mr. President, it attempts to conform the rules bundle to a bill that is moving through the legislature now. I urge its adoption.
Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment to the amendment offered by the Senator from Morgan. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment to the amendment adopted. Is there further discussion of the amendment as amended? If not, the question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment to the amendment as amended offered by the Committee on the Judiciary. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to this bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2762, allowing variance in state fire code for certain buildings used solely for emergency equipment storage. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed House Bill 2899, repealing two sections of code relating to gas utility rates. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 3210, relating to the performance of installation of propane gas systems. Second reading of the bill.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our question.
Senior Senator from the 17th requesting unanimous consent that the we're back. Senate will be at ease for just a moment. Senate will be back in order. The clerk will read House Bill 3199.
Engrossed House Bill 3199 relating to removing the requirement that an ectopic pregnancy be reported. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill? Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent the bill be advanced to third reading with right to amend.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 3210 relating to the performance of installation of propane gas systems. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading.
Engrossed House Bill 3215 relating to land use. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent to return to the second order of business.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's come to my attention we have some students visiting here from George Washington High School. In the gallery up here to the north, we have Ben Valou, Reese Laverne, Audrey Street, Lisa Westerman, and Mario Palumbo, as well as Ford Sutton. If you guys wouldn't mind standing, let's stand and give you a warm welcome.
Are there further introductions? Senior Senator from the 17th. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand in recess until 4:30 p.m.
Are there announcements? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet today in 451 M at 3 p.m.
Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet at 3 o'clock p.m. in room 208 West Wing.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Hey, Mr. President, your Committee on Rules will meet at 4:20 p.m., 10 minutes before the session in the Senate President's Conference Room.
Senior Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Economic Development will meet at 2 o'clock in room 451M.
Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Pensions Committee shall meet at 1 o'clock in the Senate Finance Room 451, and the agenda has been posted.
Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Outdoor Recreation will be meeting at 1 p.m. in room 208 West.
Are there further announcements? Senior Senator from the this evening. Are there further announcements? If not, Senior Senator from the 17th moves that we recess until 4:30 today. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The Senate's in recess till 4:30 p.m. today.